Hey everybody, in today's episode, it's myself, Benjamin B, and Stevie Buckets. We got a little battle royale today. We get into sponsorship. Now, as you know, if you've been listening for any length of time, you know that Stevie Buckets is a big Narcotics Anonymous guy, and Ben B is a big Alcoholics Anonymous guy. Well, we're talking sponsorship, and we ask about 5 questions in this, and I'm the moderator, and I ask each one of these fine gentlemen a question, and the other gets to debate them, and I think that you will have a much better understanding about sponsorship and what it really means and how to properly utilize a sponsor if you even need a sponsor, which you may not, but you have to get to the end of the episode to find out. We cover all that and more. Enjoy the show. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we've got Stevie Buckets.
Happy to be here.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, Peep?
Yes, sir.
Right, Buckets?
Absolutely.
Also, go to realrecoverytalk.com. On the homepage, you're going to see a little link that says schedule a call. Click that link, and you'll be able to have a 10-minute conversation with us to discuss your current situation and see if we can help you in any way. We're going to talk to you about what's going on in your life. How much is your drug addict or alcoholic son or daughter or a spouse driving you absolutely bonkers, and you need direction, you need guidance, you don't know where to turn? You schedule that call with us, and we're going to help navigate that with you. Also, go to realrecoverytalk.com/guides. There you're going to find a catalog of guides that myself, Ben, and Tambini handcrafted ourselves. And happy to say that I actually created them on Canva too. So, well, not all of them, but most of them. I put all the nice little color combinations and everything in there. So you can go to realrecoverytalk.com/guides, and they're assessments, if you will. And what you can do is you could put your email in, you can download whatever assessment it is that you want, or all of them, fill them out, and see if any of them relate to you or if they make sense to you. If you have any questions, then you go back to the homepage and click schedule a call, and then we go over that assessment with you, and yeah, it's good information for you to have. Also, Ben, tell us about the Facebook group.
The Sobriety Network, Tom. It is a spot where we encourage you to jump onto Facebook and join us. We post some pretty cool stuff, got some open comment sections, etc. But whether you want to be sober, you're in early recovery, or want to support a loved one somehow, get some more knowledge and community, it's there.
The Sobriety Network, Stevie Buckets is in there too, dropping bombs all the time. And Ben is going to be going live in there at some point. Just waiting on Ben to say when, but he will be going live in the Sobriety Network. So go to Facebook and type in the Sobriety Network, click join, answer 2 questions, and we will let you in. Last but not least, go to realrecoverytalk.com/services. If you would like to schedule a 1-hour call with myself, Ben, or Dr. Tambini, we could talk about whatever it is that you would like to talk about. You can go to realrecoverytalk.com/services and sign up there. How we doing, friends?
We are good. We are ready for battle.
What do you got to say to that, Steve?
I mean, it's going to be a slaughter. So I don't know. Battle implies like 2 competing armies.
Yeah, this isn't even okay. So let me just lay the groundwork.
How did this come up?
Here.
I'll tell you how it came up. I'll just explain.
We were in group.
We were in group. You were sharing your story. Amazing job. I actually got emotional.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, no, it was like really. I've heard your story a bunch of times. Like whatever reason, it particularly hit me.
You sissy. Go ahead.
And no, it was good. I really, the clients loved it. And a client asked a question. It was a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Do I need a sponsor to go through the steps?" And literally simultaneously, you said no and I said yes. And we just looked at each other and you're like, this should be a podcast topic. And,
yes.
And now 4 days later, 3 days later, whatever it was, here we are.
Steve, you did a very good job explaining that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ben, do you have anything to add?
No, that was well said.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really cool discussion. I got to give the individual credit for asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, like there was a lot of really good follow-up questions.
There was.
In particular, I started to notice, because when I tell my story, I have a tendency to talk about certain steps and how they affected me, or the outcome or the experience with it. And there were some clients that asked some specific questions where I was like, they're actually doing the work, and I could tell by the caliber of questions they were asking.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
It was like they wouldn't know to ask those questions unless they were in the process of doing so.
And they weren't surface level.
No.
And I know who you're talking about in particular.
Yeah.
And it was a really good question and thought provoking. And yeah, it's could tell that they're in it and they're curious.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Okay, so let me just lay some ground rules for this battle royale, all right? It's going to be kind of like the presidential debate. I am going to ask a question, and each one of you has 2 minutes to respond, and then the opposite party has 1 minute to follow up. Does that sound good?
I mean, yeah, just way heavier than like I thought it was going to be just a regular discussion, but whatever. I'm down for everything, bro. I'm down to clown. Let's go.
All right.
I didn't know it was going down like this.
Me neither. I just thought of it.
Man.
So one of you is going to prevail as Joe Biden, and one of you is going to prevail as Donald Trump. So
I should have been friends with
who's
the
it
network.
going to be?
So I could have got the questions ahead of time.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Well,
Good.
full transparency, I'm thinking of the questions as we go. All right?
Perfect. I didn't know you were coming up with questions.
Yeah.
Do you know what questions to ask?
I just said I'm coming up with them as we go.
But wait, don't we have? I thought there was just one question, and it was, do we need?
No,
at
there's
least
going to be.
sponsor to-
Let you'll get the hang of this.
This is
okay?
fun.
Okay.
We should recap our spots though, real quick. Can I say what they are?
No. What do you mean? Recap our
or risk
spots.
where we align, if you will.
No,
Not
no.
align, I guess, but like where we stand.
Okay, fine.
Where
go
we
ahead.
stand.
Go ahead.
When the client asked if you need a sponsor to go through the steps, I said no.
Mm-hmm.
Steve said yes.
Correct.
So
Right.
that's where we're standing right now.
And for what it's worth, we both have a lot of experience. Ben, you've definitely taken way more men through this program than through I have. I've had my experience myself. I do, for those of you who don't know, I do Narcotics Anonymous. Ben does AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. So, yeah. Narcotics Anonymous is a little longer process. I would say more thorough, but that's,
We shall see.
we shall see. And by the way, it's all love.
Oh, dude, we're sitting here smirking,
No, it's
laughing at each other.
Because I don't want people. Some people like actually like, I
That's
don't
true.
like the conflict of NA, and there's no conflict.
No,
We're all the same family. That's how I look at it.
If anybody's been in long-term recovery, they're like in a very fun way.
Mm-hmm.
There is bickering back and forth between AA and NA. Like
Yes.
we tease each other. There's entire meme pages on social media, like from my end, all about bashing NA.
Yeah, and from my
That's
end, all about
Yeah.
And it's funny because like the memes, I know they're just trying to bash NA, like the girls in NA. I'm like, what are you talking? That looks good to me. But anyways, you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Tom, I thought you were looking at a question.
All right, let's get rolling on this, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Question number 1, and this one goes to you, Ben. What is the true job of a sponsor? Your time starts now.
From my perspective, to take an individual through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, read it to them line by line. Every time it says stop and do something, you stop and you do it. Their responsibility is to provide a proper and very precise explanation of what Alcoholics Anonymous really is and what it isn't, not putting a spin on it, exactly as it was laid out by the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Clear-cut, specific directions, just like the big book says. I concede the rest of my time.
You concede the rest of your time to Buckets?
Sure.
All right. Buckets,
Same question.
same question.
I mean, pretty much the same thing. I would say, in my words, of just taking someone through the steps. That implies, obviously, we read a book together. Sometimes they read on their own. I have them highlight things that are particularly stick out for them in their experience, and we can go, or questions that we can go over. We use This is kind of like something maybe I disagree with. There's a few methods of going through the steps in NA, like different sort of like packets and workbooks. I do a very old school one that my sponsor gave to me when I first got clean in 2009, and that's how I know he went through it with his sponsor, and his sponsor has many decades clean. Just a packet, we call it, and that's how we go through, and it's a pretty thorough. It can take about, I would say, a year to go through our steps if you work them consistently.
That was going to be my second question.
I get a minute.
Okay.
To respond. Remember the format.
Remember
the format.
Go ahead with your minute.
So I agree with Steve too on the experience part. And he did touch on the different methods. One thing that we have seen through 12-step programs, which I do not like, is different variations and twists and turns people put on the steps. Mm-hmm. For instance, in AA, the 12 and 12 came out, which is a book called 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Now, its intention by the writer, Bill W., was for it to be just about the 12 traditions. However, what happened, per Bill W.'s words, had he not put anything about the steps in there, then people would not have bought the book. So he put in, quote from Bill W., Bill Wilson, short stories about the steps. And what happened is the 12 and 12 became this other piece of literature that's a very easy read. I call it recovery poetry. There's no actual instructions on how to work the steps in it, though. And what ends up happening is sponsors will tell their sponsees, oh, we work the steps through the 12 and 12, which is not a thing. You made up your own program. That is not the original program as created, if you will, by the first 100 members and laid out by the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. They put a twist. And now you have these different variations, and what we are seeing is lack of consistency. I should be able to go to any sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous and be taken through the steps the exact same way as the first 100 members. And AA, there's a saying in AA has been watered down. You hear it all the time from the old timers. That is why. Then a new piece of literature. Then someone came up with how to do a 4step.com, print out this worksheet. So it's lost its consistency.
Okay, I was going to have to interject there because you went over your minute. But
well, I'm good at controlling that clock. Demanding
obviously not. I mean, take advantage of it. Okay. All right. Question number 2. Steve, I'll give this one to you, and you kind of alluded to it. How much time should it take to take somebody through the 12 steps?
Okay, I think consistently, like in terms of the sponsee is not procrastinating and the sponsor is meeting up and all that. I feel like a step a month is very doable. And I know, like, and here's the thing, and I've had many discussions with people in AA. What do you mean that takes too long? This person's dying of alcoholism. They need a solution. I feel, in my opinion, you need to live each step. You know what I mean? Because and I get what like people in AA would say. I totally understand. That makes me think. I'm like, that's interesting. But at the same time, you see people with 60 days sober and they're sponsoring guys. You know what I mean? And I understand like how maybe that was probably really good and healthy. 100 years ago, but like we're kind of in a different era, especially with substances and using and all that. I don't know. I do know. In my experience, I feel, I feel like a year to take a year-ish, nothing longer than that, but shorter, maybe 10 months even. I feel like a step a month, and again, some steps need to be more thorough than others, but I think it's important. I think that is a realistic length to complete just 12 steps of NA.
Ben?
I have 2 minutes.
Oh, boy.
Go ahead.
So I'll say this. I personally believe a year is too long. And I'll break it down like this. I don't really necessarily want to put a specific time frame on it. Mm-hmm. For me, I do my best to meet up with my sponsees once a week. And you could probably get through the steps in 3 months. If I could do it faster by meeting up more consistently, I would, 100%. And here's the reason why. For instance, step 1, we admitted we were powerless. You're either admitting you're powerless over drugs or alcohol or you're not. What's there to sit on for a month? You see what I'm saying? Like, you've either made the decision that alcohol and drugs has completely defeated you and put you into a state of reasonableness, or you haven't. If I'm sitting there thinking about it, I haven't fully conceded to my innermost self, step 1. It's a yes or no question. Same with like step 2. I either know that I have to believe before I can have faith, or I don't. Third step, I'm either turning my will over or I'm not. The other parts of that part of my argument will be, let's say a step a month. If I'm on my 4th step, or that means I'm 4 months out. How am I going to make it through my first 4 months just hanging on if I'm harboring all these resentments? We got to be rid of the stuff which have been blocking us. And specifically on that step in the big book, it says, next we launched on a course of vigorous action. Going through the steps quickly doesn't necessarily mean you're not doing them thoroughly. Because again, like, how much time are you putting in each time you meet up, etc. The 5th step, let me touch on the 9th step, actually, specifically the 9th step, and I've been harping on this one a lot lately. We'll be amazed before we're halfway through. If I'm doing a step a month, I have to wait 9 months before I'm any type of amazed. I need some amazement right up front. I need this to start happening quick. And just because you've gone through 12 steps doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to hit absolutely every single thing. You can always go back and add things to your 4th and 5th step. You can always go back and add to your list of amends. It's getting through it so that you understand the psychological part of it, and then you can apply those principles to your life. And the faster that you're sponsoring people, in my opinion, the better. Because when you become the teacher is when you really master the principles. And we've talked about being a hypocrite. I don't want to tell people to do things that I'm not doing myself. There's just so much to being a sponsor. And in its simplest form, my only job as a sponsor was to literally parrot what was in the big book that my sponsor shared with me, and share my experience on it. And you can't be wrong about your experience, as long as you stick to the original formula here in my left hand.
Okay, Steve, 1 minute to respond.
Okay. First off, when you said you don't put a time frame on it, I just want to say I do agree with that. I'm just saying realistically what it has looked like in my life as a sponsee and as a sponsor. You know what I mean? Year, 10 months roughly. Of course, obviously we're addicts. We love procrastination, all that. And I feel like you're the first step example. There's homework for us. And I don't hate the word homework because we automatically recoil, but there's work that we go into really deep. For us, it's okay, a yes or no question. Are you powerless over your addiction? But then it's like actual questions. And some of those questions are simple and some of them aren't so simple. So that can take a little while.
Can you give a couple of examples of what questions?
I'd have to pull up. Let me pull up step 1.
Okay. While you're looking at that, he concedes his time to you, Ben.
Oh my God.
I should have been prepared for this debate.
I didn't know. Again, I thought we were having I didn't know it was like
so
this.
So far, you're
serious.
looking like Joe Biden.
I didn't know it was this serious.
Come on, man.
If I'm Joe Biden, do I get like a pudding and a nap time after this?
Well, it is almost the end of the workday.
Okay,
so.
Good. Hold on.
I always promised we would never interject politics into this podcast. But everybody saw the debate. You don't have to be you don't have to be political to
and to have fun with it. At the end of the day, let me just throw it out there since you brought it up. The world of politics right now is nuts.
Yeah,
it's comical.
Yeah, of course.
It's just it is what it is.
And onto that point, and this is kind of maybe this is a whole episode worth of topic in terms of first step. Question, what are we, because we can get so wrapped up into this and we can get obsessive, and this is addict, not addict. We can get obsessive with this whole thing. We feel what's out of our control. Oh my God, if this doesn't go our way, all the doom and gloom. Like it's good to remember and center ourselves what we actually have power over in our lives and what we don't,
That's a good point.
I want to touch on that real quick. like as practical application, because I do believe what Steve said. For instance, for me, what did I say to you, Tom? It was probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago. I stopped listening to political podcasts because I'd listen to them driving into work in the morning, and then I'd just be pissed off by the time I got here. So I've made a conscious decision for myself to kind of keep up a little bit. Like I watch a debate, but like, dude, the amount of negativity that comes out of listening to politics, dude, it just wasn't doing me any good.
Yeah.
I keep myself educated on the topics because I do have to vote, but outside of that, man, it's not going to be a daily part of my life. Like I used to be all on top of it. Now I'm like, it's just making me angry.
And the thing is too, which is kind of the beautiful thing about recovery is like, I have so many people when I go to a meeting, I know they probably, we have different views on politics, but we just hug each other. And like, I feel closer to them than a lot of people who maybe align the same way as me in those ways that isn't in recovery. You know what I'm saying? Like we're all there for each other, ideally, so.
All right. I've lost control of the debate.
All right. I have the questions pulled up. I have, I'll give it a sample of, one question is number 2, how have we been isolating? That's a question. Because it talks about it, and I don't have my basic text in front of me. Again, I didn't know it was going to be like, Ben has, your big book Ben over here. I should have known he would have his big book.
I just keep it right there.
Yeah,
So
yeah, never too far. I'm not hanging on for dear life anymore, though, so I could keep it in my car. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing around.
I'll give you that one.
I love you, bro. You know
I love the big book, so I'll let you have it.
No, yeah. How do I apply the first step in my life? There's one that always trips people up. I'm going to find it. It's like one of those questions. It's like you have to go throughout the whole book to answer that question. Hold on. I'm going to find it. Okay.
Pressure's on.
I know. I don't like it because I know
when you're looking for something and the pressure's on.
I can't read as well. Like I'm like, my vision's not as good. Hold on. Okay, a question. What does sponsorship have to do with the first step? There's a lot. There's 30 questions.
So you have to complete those 30 questions to get through the first step?
Yes.
I want to say something that wasn't on the first, that's not in the literature, but my sponsor said to me and resonated with me. See, that's the thing, that consistency. If I'm going to say something out of my experience that's not actually in the literature, I like pointing it out. My sponsor said this quote to me. However, it's not in the big book. It's not part of the program. Mm-hmm. He said, Ben, we did our first step. We did our research out there. By the time I'm here, my research on the first step is done.
That's a good point.
If that makes sense. See what I'm saying?
Addiction's so crazy, though, is like I've seen people with the most horrible, chaotic, unmanageable situations, and they'll still, and that's, the craziness of addiction, and they'll still be like, and we talk about, I think that's where, when you talked about blind spots, came up earlier, yeah. You're still like, maybe I can,
Well, to your point, I'll go ahead and defend you a little bit here.
Thank you,
because this a lot of this is semantics, and right now we're having fun with it, like going at each other. But even with the first step, like you're talking about, the big book specifically talks about the illusion and the delusion. The illusion, according to the first step, means that you believe you can still control this. Once you realize you can no longer control it, but try to convince yourself that you can try the old game again, now you're delusional. Because now you know the truth. I can't control my heroin use anymore. I know that's a thing. But maybe I can pull it off this way. So you go from it being an illusion to being a delusion. Does that make sense?
Completely.
So there, you can have a grasp of the first step and then revert back to being delusional and forgetting.
Yeah.
We've seen that with clients, even recently.
Yes. And I want to say this. I wish I knew my basic text the way the big book. I have like so much mad respect.
It's the first, really, if I'm honest, it's mostly the first 103 pages.
Okay.
I've just read them over and over and over and over again with sponsees.
I want to say something. First off, wasn't the original question, why do we need a sponsor to go through the steps?
Yes, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay. All right.
I only have a couple more questions.
You hired this moderator.
I know, right?
We need Joe Rogan.
Rogan would be great.
All right, next
David
question.
Muir was better. No, I'm kidding.
And I think you guys will probably agree on this. Should there be a long interview process when picking a sponsor?
I'm going to say no.
Who's going first? You have.
Who goes first? I guess I already started.
Yep.
I don't like, to me, like words like that is so ego driven. like I'm interviewing you, bro. I'm just a crackhead. You know what I mean? And I know I've been clean for a little while. Like I don't like the interview. To me, if someone asks me to be my sponsor, I'm their sponsor until they're not, or until I'm not anymore. Whatever that looks like.
Can I? Sorry, interjection, please. Can I reframe the question?
Sure.
How relatable do you have to be to a potential sponsor? How much do you have to have in common?
I was going to touch on this.
Yeah, like
I don't think it. For me, my sponsor is so different than me, like temperament wise, lifestyle wise, just age. Like he was, and it's worked for me. He's been my sponsor since 2007. You know, I mean, I had a relapse obviously, and I got clean in 2009. But my point is, he's been with us for a long time, and we're very different people. And it's worked out. Again, that's anecdotal, but I think it could get you through the door. Like, I will say this, like when I came into rooms, I thought I was the worst of the worst and no one was as bad as me, the things I didn't. And when someone shared and that like they went through similar things, that relatability did help me realize, oh, I belong here. But I think for the sponsorship thing, I don't think for me, it wasn't a huge thing, if that makes sense.
Okay, Ben?
To answer your very first question that you just asked, I don't have time to take applications. I'm dying. I don't got time to go and collect resumes. And I was going to touch on what you asked the second question, how relatable do you have? I'm sick and suffering in my active addiction. Who am I to know what I need? And again, like my take on this would be pay attention to the universe. For instance, if the opportunity to get a sponsor pops up, don't ignore it. Like if it was a thing that was like meant to be and you didn't put any action into it and it just falls in your lap, run with it. Don't say to yourself, oh, that guy's not enough like me, or vice versa. Because I've seen both ends of I've experienced both ends of this. My very first sponsor ever, we were two peas in a pod, man. We both surfed. He grew up here. I knew his younger brother, and it didn't work out. I won't get into details. But then the best sponsor I ever had in my life, as far as taking me through the big book accurately, and ultimately the one that I feel like I learned the most from and was able to gain the tools for long-term sustainable sobriety, him and I got nothing in common, dude. He wears like flat brim hats and like a Newport's guy. You know what I'm saying? Like big gold chains.
What's a Newport's guy?
He smokes Newports.
Oh, okay.
You know.
Yeah.
He kind of looked like an NA guy.
That's why he probably was so good.
Maybe, Steve, maybe. He was actually a CA guy.
Oh, true.
So Cocaine Anonymous uses the big book to go through the steps. But yeah, I don't have time to take applications. Just get on it, man.
The reason I asked that question is because that's something that we see a lot, especially for the three of us working and doing what we do. We're surrounded by people that are generally speaking in their first 30 days of sobriety. And one of the biggest things that we talk to them about is getting a sponsor. And a lot of times they come back to, oh, I just haven't met somebody that I can relate to. That's why I wanted to ask that question.
Relating's very important, and I get it. The big book talks about that in the preface and the forwards, but at the same time, like, dude, start the work somewhere. You got to start somewhere. You never know what's going to click and what's not going to, and there is such thing as bad sponsorship. I'm just going to call it what it is, but that doesn't mean that I don't have the opportunity to switch it up later. But one of the things that drives me crazy, and this goes back to what you asked earlier about time frame and how long it should take to do the steps, etc. Well, one of the things I see, like our program, for instance, is 90 to 120 days on average. If a person came in here, got a sponsor week 1, they could be done working steps by the time they're done with treatment, leave treatment, go back to their hometown and start sponsoring guys. Versus showing up there. My sponsor would always say, if you want to get something out of a meeting, bring something to it. Imagine being in the position, because what I hate, dude, we'll have clients here we have some that are resistant getting a sponsor, and they wait so long that their treatment's almost over. then they're dead in the water and they have to go home and find a new one anyway. You could have been in a position to bring something to your meeting back home versus going there as someone who needs something. And that's what we refer to as an AA thief.
Well, we currently have somebody literally driving here on their way, driving down here right now. Prime example, was here 60 days, didn't get a sponsor, had all the right plans and said all the right things. I'm going to do all this stuff when I get back home. Fast forward 2 months, I get a call from his wife. He's drinking again. It's worse than ever. And now he's on his way back.
And this goes back to the original question of this whole topic. Do you need a sponsor to take you through the steps? Let's say you do half and half.
Can we get there? I want to properly get into that.
It's just such a good
last question, and then we're going to get into that. Last question.
Don't let me forget about what I was just going to say.
And I want to say just one quick, and I'll bring that up. I'll remind you, Ben. But I want to say this. The thing with clients and people new in recovery, they don't know what the word relatability means. You know what I mean? How about relatability to the person's pain? Relatability to the person's, like that type of stuff.
I like that.
Rather than like, oh, this person, I want a guy who golfs. I want a guy who, you know what I mean? Like that type of stuff. That's what I'm, from my experience.
Relatable on an emotional bankruptcy level.
The one we hear all the time is my drug of choice.
That's true.
Right.
I think that's a good one for this example too, like how I've ended up AA. My drug of choice, just to call it what it is anything I could put in a needle, primarily heroin at the time. But I ended up in AA because like I wasn't focused on, oh, they do the same drug of choice as me. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
Which, I don't know, man. It's I ended up where I ended up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. Can men sponsor women? Can women sponsor men? Is there an application to which it is okay? Ben, the time starts with you.
Okay, so I will say I believe men should be with men, women should be with women. However, I'm always going to revert back to the history of the original 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a point in time where women had to be sponsored by men. And vice versa. When the population of 12-step was so small, if you went to a meeting with all men and you were a woman, who's going to sponsor you? They had no choice back then. And there's been good outcomes. Today's recommendation is what's that book called? Living Sober. Is it conference approved literature? I think Living Sober is conference approved literature, but it's funny you bring this up because we literally just read about this in this random meeting I went to. I'm not a huge fan of the Living Sober book. I'll just throw that out there. It's kind of cheesy, but it does touch on this where it says like romance can happen and like, you know, you get sex involved with the sponsee. You got
romance can happen, or it oftentimes does.
Yes,
unless it's like a, gay situation, if you will.
Yeah. And it's a running joke. I've brought it up several times on this podcast. People make fun of me. They're like, Ben only sponsors gay men over the age of 50. Like, I've had a lot of gay sponsees, and there's been no issue. Would that be an issue? I mean, let's call it what it is. I'm not going to deny the fact that probably some of my gay sponsees are like, oh, there's a good-looking man, and he knows the 12 steps. Let me go ask him. Like, I'm just going to call it what it is, but it's ended up being very good, healthy relationships. And even to the fact where I think, let's say, for instance, one of my sponsees that's gay came to me with an ulterior motive, unbeknownst to me, other than working 12 steps. I, as a sponsor, was able to establish and say, hey, this is what a healthy relationship with a man looks like. And I've seen, because I've actually heard this from some gay women, where the sponsee was like, oh, I'm picking this chick because she knows 12 steps and she's hot, and eventually I can date her because she's sick. But then that woman who has solid sobriety behind her shows her what a healthy relationship with the woman is. No, darling, we are not here to... I was going to say something inappropriate, but...
Thank God for sponsorship. Just going to throw that out there. What the whole thing's about. Anyways.
thank God for good sponsorship.
Gun sponsorship, yeah.
Because I said earlier, there's such thing as bad sponsorship, and I'm just chomping at the bit to get to the original piece here.
Well, I thought of one more question,
Oh,
so
boy.
hurry up with your thought.
Okay, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, that. There's the situations. I know Eric here. Eric, if you watch our reels, he's got the goatee, and he sponsors a woman that's a lesbian. And he actually talked to me about it first, like wondering my thoughts on it. Totally healthy and appropriate. But I also know cases of, I've got some male friends in Alcoholics Anonymous who have sponsored women, and it ended up going very sideways. There was ulterior motives on the sponsor and the sponsee's side. So again, I revert back to men should be with men, women should be with women.
Steve?
Yeah, I agree with that. And like kind of a black and white look at it. It would be men versus or men with men, women with women for sure. Now, in my experience in recovery, what I have seen is, you know, if the gentleman's 70 years old and the woman's like, you know, I don't know, like 30, I don't know. I'm like, I guess I could still can get sideways. Again, depending on the motives. I just know, like, I remember my grand sponsor, this young woman kept asking, and she couldn't get a week clean, kept asking him, but she would show up to me. She would go to one of those people who go to meetings, but couldn't get clean. And she would kept asking my grand sponsor, Vito, like, could you sponsor me? Could you sponsor me, please? And she's like, he finally said, look, you go to detox right now, I'll sponsor you when you get out. And she did. And I think that woman, I don't want to misspeak, but I think she actually, this is a story from a while ago, but she's still clean as far as I know. The point is, though, but he's a much, much older man. Like, he's in his 80s, you know? Again, lesbian, a lesbian to a man, or you know, our therapist here, Maya, who does NA, she sponsors some gay men. Like, it just, I don't want to say case by case, but yeah, I don't think it could work out. Ben, my views are kind of pretty much exactly yours on down.
Here's what I want to say to this. As the moderator, I do want to contribute. I would challenge, even in these situations.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Even in these situations that you guys have laid out. If I am, let's say, for instance, I am approached by a woman and she says, Tom, I've asked a handful of women to sponsor me. It hasn't worked. I would like you to take me through the steps. First question I would say is why? Second question I would say is, do you feel like you can't relate to women? Do you feel like you can relate to men more? And I would hone in on that, because I think a lot of times people use this as an excuse to, again, we see this in treatment. It happens more with women to men. Sometimes we get women in here that are like, because there's no, we all know, generally speaking, girls fight, right? They do. I don't relate to women. I only relate to men. Therefore, I want a man sponsor. I challenge that. You need to learn how to relate to women.
Not just relate, but again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about having healthy relationships with women, because I'm really glad you brought this up. I didn't think at this point, but how many women I've had come up to me here at Rock and say, hey, Ben, I want to find a male sponsor because I don't get along with women. However, I'll point out to them, how did you get your drugs and your alcohol? And a lot of time there was a dynamic where they latch themselves onto a man for the need of alcohol and drugs, whether through having a pimp or, I mean, that would be an extreme example, something along those lines, where they just haven't learned how to have those relationships. They look at it like, what can I get from him? And they don't even realize that that's built into them.
It's a really good point.
Yeah.
You know, we see that a lot. And I'm like, no, get with the woman. You need to learn how to have a relationship with women, because that's part of your sickness.
Okay. I'm going to, this I think is going to be a good question. And I'm going to pose this one to Steve first. Steve, I'm going to give you a scenario, and we're going to role play. Okay. I see you at a meeting, at an NA meeting. All right. I heard you share And now I approach you after the meeting. Hey, Steve, I'm Tom. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, listen, I heard you share, and man, great share, fire share. I was curious, are you taking sponsees?
And yes, if this is the situation, yes.
Yeah, don't read too much into this, Steve. Oh, you are? Okay, great. Would you be willing to sponsor me, take me through the steps?
Yeah.
Okay. Now's probably a good time for me to tell you, I am doing Suboxone. Would you still be willing to take me through the steps?
That's a tough one.
Why? Why, Steve?
It's interesting. This is an interesting one because I don't know how. I'm going to try to articulate this the best as I can, because when that's a mood mind altering substance.
Okay.
I don't know how much. I would probably do it for what it's worth. Sidebar, like I would do it to best of my ability, and hopefully maybe it'll something along the lines they'll want to stop. But I don't know. In my mind, I don't know how much. I don't think they get the full spiritual awakening. Perhaps. I mean, I don't. In my experience, if they're kind of a blocking with being high through Suboxone, that makes sense.
Or Subutex or methadone or marijuana.
I feel it. I could be completely wrong, but like, I preface it with saying that because like I'm not. What do I know about in terms of when God's going to come to someone? But
so you would reluctantly.
I would. I think I would.
Have you ever been posed with that situation?
Yes, and they usually don't. It's almost like half measures. You know what I mean? Like they're usually not all in anyway, so they drop off pretty quickly.
Okay.
From my experience,
all
they
right.
have not gone. I don't think finished the first step. You know, and I'm not going to tell someone to get off that too if that's saving their life currently, or maybe they're just not ready. I just don't like. For me, if I'm on a substance, like I'm not. It's hard for me to see the truth about myself and be thorough in my step work. Is guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, and have a conscious contact with my higher power. In my experience, you know.
Same role play, Ben. Hey, liked your share. Would like to have you as a sponsor, but I'm on Suboxone. Would you take me through this?
Yes. I've had this experience a lot. I get this phone call from a lot of my sponsees that are now sponsoring me. It's been a pretty regular thing throughout my sobriety where a sponsee in particular will call me asking me my opinion. And I tell them it's up to them, because what I don't want to happen, and Suboxone and methadone in particular, two that I've dealt with, where I don't want the sponsor to look down on. If you're going to agree to work with someone through 12 steps, you don't talk down to them. Mm-hmm. You're not judging them. You're putting the same effort you would into somebody that was completely abstinent and sober. Now, do I believe that somebody is clean and sober on methadone or Suboxone? I do not. However, the reason that I have made the choice with both Suboxone and methadone, I've done it on numerous occasions with people, is I'm trying to think back to how many it's been. I had one methadone guy and two Suboxone guys. It's not like this happened. I mean, keep in mind, that's 3 over the course of, I think the last time somebody asked me was 3 years ago in that situation. So that's like 3 over the course of 10 years, which is not a huge number. But all 3 of those times, I started taking them through the steps, and then they made the decision to get off of methadone and Suboxone. What I didn't want to do, and this was my decision, was to cast them out. Primary purpose is to help the alcoholic, drug addict who still suffers. That person is suffering. My primary purpose is to do my best to be helpful to them. Now, there's a difference between enabling. I will say this, like if someone came to me and they're like, I'm smoking weed, I would feel different and probably say no, because with weed, there's the I'm high, I'm not high. I'm high, I'm not high. Suboxone, methadone, while I still believe you're high, your tolerance is just adjusted to it, and you're just not there on the same level of, what's the word I always use? Cognitively on the same level. There is more of a stable, I don't know, it's not as much of an up and down, if you will.
Yeah, they're more level, it's not even about them getting, I mean, and you see that a lot of times with people on Suboxone that are, especially in particular on Suboxone maintenance, they don't feel high.
But you also have to keep in mind, this is a decision that I've made for myself, and I do go case by case. Now, if I have a guy that's sitting in front of me on Suboxone and they're like drooling on themselves, I'll be like, bro, I usually say yes to this situation, but right now you look over medicated on Suboxone, and I'm not comfortable sitting here doing this. Like,
well, and it's a waste of your time.
I wouldn't call it a waste of my time, and here's why. Because my baseline answer to saying yes to guys, if I can, even while they're on mat, get them more knowledge about their disease and about what this process looks like, the day that they decide that they truly want to be clean and sober and abstinence-based, they got like a head start.
Makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? You're not starting from scratch. If I can teach you about the mental obsession and the physical allergy, I could teach you about the principles on why you would want to do a 4th and 5th step and a 9th step. And then eventually, because I think that's what happened, is these guys bought into like, and the other thing is like, as we approach the 12th step, this could have been part of their thought process. Like, I would say to them, are you going to be comfortable sponsoring guys and you get some guy that's abstinent space and then you got to tell him as the sponsor, hey, yeah, I'll sponsor you, but I want to let you know I'm on Suboxone. Then like the shame, ego, pride, guilt set in, and it tends to make people want to get off the stuff. Right. Why isn't this working? Why won't you feel apart? It's not me to say, hey, you're on Suboxone, you're not going to feel apart. I like to put them in a situation where they begin to experience that on their own. But every case is different, man. Opinions are going to run to extremes on this one. I've had sponsees say, Ben, I just can't, thank you for your insight, I just can't do it. I'm like, well, then if you tell them you can't do it, because that's the right answer for you, because I wouldn't want you doing something that you're not comfortable doing. And keep in mind, too, like, for what it's worth, the three of us sitting here are pretty much experts in addiction. Like, I know how to navigate a lot of different personalities and situations at this point. Like, we've worked with thousands of people. I'm not somebody that just does 12-step meetings and like sponsors a few guys a year and like has a job like digging ditches. This is literally what I do.
All right.
Is learning how to be more effective with different types of people.
We're exposed to, and we take part in more like modalities too, and we deal with so many different personalities and different issues. And that's the thing too. Like for me, like what I've seen, it's maybe, don't get me wrong, I've seen people completely drooling in the back of a meeting, going get, because I know they just came from like a mat place. You know what I mean? But like in terms of like guys I've known in terms of the sponsorship discussion, like they might not have been drooling at each other. They might not have been drooling on themselves, but they also weren't like completely, you can tell, on the level, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But and I'm curious, Ben, from your opinion in terms of doing the actual step work, do you think it can be done as thoroughly
on mat?
Yeah.
I don't know that thoroughly. Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Will it have the same effect?
That's kind of what I mean. Not just like just the work, but in terms of maybe the internal change or the internal effect.
Yeah, but I just for me, I see what you're asking for sure, but I don't know that I can even put myself in a spot where I can.
Well, it goes back to the first step. If we admitted that we're powerless over, for the sake of this matter, drugs and alcohol, and that our lives have become unmanageable, how can we thoroughly do a first step if we're actively using a mood and mind altering substance? Me personally, I would struggle with that. Like, yeah, I am powerless over everything but Suboxone or but methadone.
Keep in mind, too, part of my story, I was the guy that was on methadone.
Yeah.
I was the guy that was on Suboxone. And just because I and I was showing up to meetings, and I had a sponsor, and I actually did keep my mouth shut about being on methadone when I got a sponsor. I didn't tell him. This is when I was in Minnesota. I had a sponsor at one point. I didn't tell him I was on methadone. Had I told that guy, would he have sponsored me? Probably not. But at the end of the day, does that mean I got nothing from him? No. I still got an experience. I still left with a little bit more knowledge. And, you know, most people don't get this on their first try. Let's call it what it was. But the day that it clicked, maybe the little bit of knowledge that he gave me while I was on methadone made a difference in my recovery.
Yeah, you knew where to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question.
Mm-hmm.
Does a sponsor need to have a sponsor? Who would like to go first?
But I'll let Ben take it.
No.
What?
No.
No, a sponsor does not need a sponsor.
That wasn't your question.
What's the question?
The question is, a sponsor need to take a sponsor? Excuse me. Does a sponsee need a sponsor to take them through the steps?
Oh.
There's a
Oh,
difference.
yeah. You're right.
Well, now you just asked another good question, though. Does a sponsor need a sponsor?
All right, but we don't have much time left. So no to that. Do you agree with that?
Do you need? I don't think I'm going to use, but I feel like I enjoy the relationship and I like to continuously work on my steps. You know what I mean? With breaks here and there. I think it's ideal.
Okay.
I've been through 12 steps. I've had a spiritual awakening. Like, I don't do the sponsor by name thing. Like, just to say I have a sponsor.
Well, it's not just to say, like, I have a gentleman. I don't know. I have my boy Warren, who I call consistently, maybe once every week, maybe once every couple weeks, sometime once a month. You know what I mean? We just, I don't even, again, I don't know if I'm going to go out and smoke crack if I don't stop talking to him, but I know it's part of my fellowship and my circle. And we go, and look, I'm a different person than I was, 10 years ago. You know what I mean? When I doing the steps, I've done the steps quite a few times now, and different. I have a different life now, and that requires different perspective. So, I do further work. So, and I need and then that goes back to the question I need a sponsor to go through that work.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Let's go back on the history of it.
Okay, you got 2 minutes. Then
I don't even need 2 minutes.
Okay.
Ebby Thatcher was Bill W.'s sponsor. They did the Oxford 6 Tenets. It took them through the 6 Tenets, which turned into 12 steps for layman's terms. Ebby Thatcher relapsed after taking Bill through those steps. Did Bill W. ever get another sponsor? No.
Okay. Well,
But can I touch on something?
Sure.
While I say that, because I want to touch on something that kind of annoys me too, because I'm part of Facebook groups that get in these arguments about the semantics of AA. You've seen it, Steve.
I have.
I invited him into a group, and eventually I left this one. It started off really great, and then it turned into a group where people were just in arguments about stuff that didn't matter.
A lot of ego.
People would be like, well, Bill W. said, and Bill W. did, and I'm a huge Bill W. fanboy. Don't get me wrong. However, with the whole Bill W. said and Bill W. did, I got to sit back and look at myself. Bill W. was human too. He asked for a drink on his deathbed. He did LSD while in recovery in 1955. And he continuously cheated on his wife in sobriety.
I'm glad you said that because I preempted what I was about to say.
Bro, even Bill W.
And maybe if he had a sponsor, he wouldn't have done those things.
Nah, he would have done them anyway, bro.
I don't know because he wasn't. He sounds like he stopped working his steps. Dare I say? I mean,
maybe. Who knows? He's
'Cause
not
don't get
here. He's not here to answer.
again,
How does having a sponsor convince somebody whether to live by principles or not?
well, it's
You know how many people called him out? And he still didn't do it.
yeah. Well, there's a difference between your sponsor calling you out and
Is there?
I feel like I mean,
I don't think so.
why did Luke Skywalker not need Obi-Wan Kenobi?
You went there.
I did went there. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
All right, let's get to the last question.
Yeah, but then Obi-Wan Kenobi let Darth Vader kill him, and he was only there in spirit, bro.
I'll put it.
So essentially, Luke Skywalker didn't have a sponsor either.
That's true. And again, I just did a Hero's Journey group with and then I'm like, now I'm like setting my own point. And then I did the Hero's Journey group on Friday in terms of the mentor must eventually leave, and then the growth happens. But you know, our journey continues. You know what I mean? And I've helped my sponsor out with like life situations.
Yes, dude. That there is role reversal.
There is.
Some of my sponsees have been tremendous help to me in the last few years. Because at this point, a lot of them have close to a decade of sobriety.
Yeah.
Or I even have a sponsee who has 30 years. He has more than double my sobriety time, but he wanted me to take him through steps.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, last question. We don't have much time on this, okay? I don't want my SD cards to run out on the cameras.
oh no,
Because we do record this in video, and if you haven't, go to YouTube and type in Real Recovery Talk if you want to see us, in person. So, what was that question again, Steve?
And again, to me, this is so self-evident. It's not even freaking funny, but whatever. Like, do you need a sponsor to take you through the steps?
Oh yeah, if you are a sponsee or if you are somebody that wants to go through the 12 steps, do you need to have a sponsor to go through this 12 steps? Ben, go ahead.
no.
Yes. Anyways, go. Oh yeah, it's your.
Here's why. Again,
Please.
I'm going to go back to the history of how it all started and how the people in the beginning were so successful. In fact,
Oh boy.
let's
Oh boy.
while I'm here, get down to where is this part? I know you're looking at me for time.
I'm curious, but I already have.
I wish I had my book.
I feel I already have a decent rebuttal.
I can't find it right now. Anyway, the reason that AA was so effective in the beginning was because there was no meetings and there was no sponsors. The way that it worked, they mailed the big book to you. Somebody read the big book. Every time it said what the people did, they would mimic and do the same thing. Every time it said stop and do something, they stopped and they did it. So people were really focused on the literature and doing the steps. In fact, on the 5th step in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about who to do your 5th step with. Why? Because there's not a single mention of anything of sponsorship in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sponsor is not a word in the literature. What ended up happening, I've talked about this 1,000 times, over the course of time, the book got mailed out to some guy in California, and he goes through the steps. He's the first one there to get sober. Then he finds a prospect, aka now called a sponsee. They called it a prospect back then. He takes the guy through the steps. Now all of a sudden you have sponsorship. It explodes into meetings. All of a sudden the fellowship, people start to experience the joy of the fellowship and the program of AA, and people started forgetting about the book and the actual program. My sponsor always had a saying, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has become unpopular amongst the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. The original intention of the big book, per the instructions, was to do these on your own. It tells you, like, if you don't have the suitable person to do your 5th step with, you can postpone until you find that person. It has to be someone that will understand yet be ineffective. It tells you can go to a church guy. What are they called? Not a pastor.
Priest.
A priest. So specifically, like, there was no sponsors back then. In AA, the members were super successful like that. That's how it even turned into what it is today, where there are sponsors. So that was a development over the course of time. And let's say, for instance, Steve, I hate what you're going to do to this poor guy in Nome, Alaska. You got this dude in Nome, Alaska who just lives alone, dying an alcoholic life. And you're going to be like, oh, poor guy in a town of population of 1. There's no sponsors there, buddy. You can't work steps. You just killed that poor Eskimo, buddy.
Well,
Why's he got to be an Eskimo, dude?
I don't know. I picked Nome, Alaska.
I'm sure he has. I can call him up in his igloo, and we can work steps. Yeah,
They got Starling.
yeah, they got Star. I'll send him a Starling, bro. First off, if he's in Nome, Alaska, drinking, I don't know how many people. I don't know. That's such an extreme example. I would just, okay, Ben. Question: So the gentleman that say you're sponsoring a gentleman for like a week, and he says, you know what? I'm just gonna do. I think I'm gonna. Ben, it's been fun. It's been real. I think I'm just gonna do the steps myself.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, now I'll change it again. Switch it up. A client comes walking in here. He's like, "Hey, I'm gonna do the steps myself."
Okay, go ahead.
Would you recommend that?
So this brings up something that has been at the forefront of my mind for a little while, because I've been hearing a lot of excuses lately from our clients. And this goes back to good sponsorship, bad sponsorship. I don't think in many cases our clients take enough accountability for their own knowledge of the steps, for their own experience of the steps. Because they're like, oh, I'm on my third sponsor. I just keep getting the wrong one, or they're not meeting up with me. I'm like, well, what have you done? You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I doubt that person's going to be doing the steps by themselves anyways.
Well, just because if they're not willing to do them by themselves, what makes you think they're going to do them with a sponsor?
And that's the thing. Let's go to a fitness thing. Let's say someone's like, I've gone through 5 personal trainers and I can't get in shape. I'm just going to, you know what I mean? Like it's not the personal trainer's problem. It's their thing. You know what I mean? They're going to have to change something.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. Ideally, yes, it would make sense to have a sponsor. And I think that there's no excuse not to have one, but that wasn't the question.
Well,
I think it's...
Here, let's get to, excuse me, but let's just get into like, I even heard you mention how going through the big book with a sponsor, how many things, if you just read it yourself, you would have first off, the big book of all things, and I think now I can see how beautifully written, you know what I mean? Like Shakespearean, dare I say, like really well written. But at the same time, I'm reading this, I don't know what these words are. Right. I don't know what these metaphors are. First off, I remember when they gave me 2 books in detox, the AA Big Book and the NA Basic Text. I opened up the Big Book just because that's like the one I heard just through like pop culture. It might have been written in like freaking Latin, you know. I wasn't, and then so I picked up the Basic Text, and I still needed my sponsor to explain these things to me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? The context behind things. All that type of stuff, you know?
But this also goes back to, and again, a lot of this is semantics, because I could go either way, but I still believe my answer is firmly no. You do not need a sponsor to go through the steps. That is a fact. However, I do not, let me make it clear.
I'm pulling up the steps. But
my experience, I do not disagree with, again, thank God for good sponsorship. I would rather somebody go through these steps by themselves through the big book than have somebody who, for the example I used earlier, just made up some way to do the steps out of the 12 and 12, which isn't even really a real thing. Again, this comes back to like, how did this happen? And I'm gonna make, I said this to Nicole. I don't think I've ever been open about this. I tend to, this is my experience. I'm gonna be straight up. I don't know that I've ever dropped this on you, Tom. No, I'm going to put a guarantee on this. I've learned more about the big book on my own. I've learned more about the steps on my own than my sponsor ever taught me. That's a fact of my life. I always gave credit to my sponsor, and I do give my sponsor, multiple sponsors at this point through the course of time, credit for what they brought to the table, their experience, their knowledge. But at the end of the day, I would say that the majority of my knowledge has been gained, more of it on my own. I probably have more notes in my big book that I've put in there through my own realizations and it evolving over the course of time than I even had original notes in there for my sponsor.
Well, which is arguably better because they're your own thoughts.
We're not even arguing that in terms of like, yours sounds like you're in terms of practical experience, being a sober man and living life. That's for sure. I agree. Our own experience and staying clean through trials and tribulations, that's going to be the best teacher. But I'm talking about a man to guide us through the steps, you know? And then eventually I could have the best sponsor in the world go over the steps with me, but until I actually live them, and again, that's another reason why maybe it's good that we don't, you know, like we kind of have an opportunity to live the step for like a month or a couple of weeks at least. But I have a question in terms of, and look, I already kind of, look, there's more than one way to carry the message, but how like in step 12, Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Okay. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to addicts. It could be just sharing in meetings, could be many things. Going to a bar and seeing someone struggle, maybe pulling themselves aside, saying, hey, there's a softer, better way. Perhaps. But we always say, go and sponsor someone. Why do we? I've heard you say that. Maybe I didn't misheard.
Yeah. Again, that's not the question, though. The question is, do you need a sponsor to go through the steps? It's not whether or not is a sponsor a good
How about
thing.
maybe the question should be, what's the most effective? Maybe that should.
Well, I think we would all agree there.
Because I need someone to, like, I don't know. Anyways.
But this goes back to most effective, where if you get a bad sponsor, quote unquote bad sponsor, it's going to be less effective than going through it yourself. Now, if you get a great sponsor who knows the book like, say, Eric does, bro, so it's case. I guess my point is going back to, like, people need to start taking accountability for their own knowledge and work and quit pointing the finger. Well, my sponsor is not good enough, or he's not doing this, or he's not doing that. Because let me throw this out there too. Today, we live in different times. It's 2024. We got YouTube University, bro, speaker tapes all over. You couldn't have more access to recovery resources. And I'm going to go back to, dude, Joe and Charlie tapes. Recorded in the 1970s. I looked it up one time, I forget. Like late 70s. These two guys, Joe and Charlie, the Joe and Charlie tapes. They go through the entire book and all the 12 steps. I learned more from them than I ever did a sponsor. Listen to those tapes. And when I tell, dude, I can't tell you how many times I give it as a suggestion. I did on Friday. We did group together.
Yeah, I never.
I told a guy.
You did.
The number one thing I want to suggest to you is listen to the Joe and Charlie tapes. You think you did it? Nope. Everybody I tell to do it doesn't do it. And it was literally a game changer in my recovery. Is that a sponsor? Joe and Charlie, I don't know, man.
It's not saying just other things can't be as effective, but in terms of just going through the steps. Again, because to understand what you're reading, to understand what you're, the guide, like, hey, should I make amends to this person? They kind of want to, you know what I mean? Like that little stuff like that could be the difference between someone relapsing and someone not relapsing. You know what I mean? Like where we could say, hey, maybe hold off on making that amends to that person. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think we're both right here. Everybody's right. It was
You're being codependent.
The accountability. I want to share a quick story. I know we're out of time. Like over the summer, I was a very trying time in my life over this past summer. Very tough. I had a sponsee who called me. He said, I think I'm going to have to switch sponsors because I'm just afraid I needed someone who will answer if I want to use. And I understood this thing, and I understood I wasn't providing enough time for him. And I said, I love you, bro. Consider me, or call me anytime you want. No hard feelings, whatever the best is. He called me up 3 months later, maybe, or 4 months later, something like that. Or somewhat recently, actually. And he said, it's interesting. I switched sponsors, and I ended up using anyways for someone who I thought would have more availability. And I just wanted to tell you that. And I said, I'm sorry that you know what I mean? And we just talked about solution and, you know, what he can learn through that. And he's doing good now, by the way. But I just wanted to share in terms of like own accountability. You know what I mean?
My camera died.
Okay.
So
anyways, does it, you know,
I follow. Absolutely. It goes
saying.
back to the accountability thing. Like take responsibility for your recovery. Nobody's coming to rescue you, as Eric would say.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun, guys. You know what? Everybody was a winner here. You both get participation trophies. And so
participation trophy.
Yep. That's what we do here on Rural Recovery Talk, Ben. You know?
For Clean a Day, we won.
Yes. All right. That is it for this episode of Rural Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach us. info@ruralrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@ruralrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.